This is modern Cairo, the Islamic neighborhood.
There's these big gigantic mosques here to the right-hand side now of Sultan Hassan and Rifai. There is more than 500 Islamic monuments in Cairo.
That building.
Get out of the museum and walk inside the mosque.
This is an old Islamic mosque in Cairo. I found Islamic Cairo just as interesting as old Egypt. The architecture is spectacular. It's not as highly decorated as later Islamic. I think this architecture begins in the 7th century, and it's very beautiful, but in a simpler way than Islamic texture, later Islamic architecture.
Barbara Schmidt talked about this niche design.
There was one special moment.
We visited several temple sites, which were also schools. I think the students primarily studied the Quran. But this is all much later architecture, surrounded by the present-day city.
The citadel here to the right-hand side. The Arab Muslim Sultan who was fighting against the Crusaders lived in. So all the sultans and the kings between the 12.
You can see modern Cairo right up against Islamic Cairo. Very little space. I felt as if I was back centuries walking through Islamic Cairo. It's really maintained its old world feeling.
But they're marvelously decorated. This was one of the main temples.
Yes. And these are like, with our measures, nowadays buildings typically like 7 floors. So there are look steps inside and people cannot walk in.
The interior.
ABC or mathematics, these were all Sunni. And this is the main reason why there's a school attached to it. We almost have no
That was the main altar.
nobody. Four, but the one where the house of the prayer is the biggest and the deepest. Now let's see it then. Yes, of course. They standing there and prostrating where the face, when the nose touches the carpet. And then people behind them in rows, tall of tall. And then
I love all the geometric designs. The Islams are not allowed to use figures, but they did wonderful things with geometry. Great example of a very early mosque. Beautiful geometric designs.
they make them in very thin lines, and then they hammer them in the carvings, and this is almost intact except for the rusty parts, but it's just incredible.
And I was interested to learn that a major element of the decoration is the use of words from the Quran. Phrases from the Quran. Like here, the writing.
And here, also to the left-hand side, is the fatwa place where they not really phenomenal. It's not like every 10 or 5 graves there is a house. No, there are only few families of undertakers. They live near the job, near the work. This is actually an interesting chance to drive through it. But
This slum was previously an ancient cemetery. People simply moved into the old tombs.
the walls of Cairo, see the reconstructed part. This is the walls that surrounded Cairo, the walls, see the gate of Al-Nasr.
I loved walking through Islamic Cairo. I got a wonderful feeling of living in the past.
And this is part of the modern day Cairo. A lot of restoration was going on. I guess it goes on continuously.
I was pleased to see that they're restoring and taking good care of their monuments of this period. They had neglected it for years.
14th century.
One of the most beautiful schools and mosques.
Section of the Khal Khalili, the great bazaar in the center of Cairo. I felt it was the heart of Cairo. You can buy anything here, from antiquities to brass plates, handmade, to having clothing made, food. It's a very exciting place. We spent the day here and just shopped and shopped. They had old rugs. It was one of the highlights of the city.
mosques also serve as centers of education and contain from grade school through college and university.
It's fainting here.
Really?
Okay. So we,
Alabaster? Yeah.
Yeah. I have to get into
This is the scene from our balcony at the Nile Hilton. More views of life along the Nile. It hasn't changed in thousands of years.
Luxor.
This is Luxor from the bus, Karnak.
We are now in Luxor, and it's very hot. Entrance to Karnak.
One of the most exciting things I found is approaching the great temples in Luxor. Here we are at the entrance of Karnak Temple. You cannot imagine how exciting I felt walking through this long row of sphinxes, I guess, and coming across these huge columns, enormous columns. One of the most impressive sights in the whole world.
These are various animals as sphinxes.
Beautifully preserved.
so the boundaries
These are columns with a closed lotus blossom,
built these islands, but they never finished them.
as opposed to the open lotus blossom.
That large. And between these two towers,
These are the closed lotus blossoms.
the ones who built these or some work in cutting stones, but it doesn't have to be a priest.
The walls of the temple are simply covered with all of these carvings, which is all about the ancient religion.
Introduced to you the gods worshipped in this big complex.
The bas-reliefs were beyond belief.
Let's see the rest of the building.
My video camera had a stop action, so I could use it for snapshots as well.
Wherever you go inside the temple, you're walking.
You can see vestiges of color here.
his this was the only, so far, recorded discovery, his first wife and only wife until she died, and then he tried to. The statue here is presented small, like all the other Egyptian queens presented small next to the king because the kings were considered gods.
As a very tiny creature between the legs of the pharaoh. You can see a woman's place in Egypt. It's hard to imagine the scale walking into this enormously high temple with some of the largest columns in Egypt. At every turn, I was amazed at the quality of the carving, the quality of the columns, the scale of the temple was just beyond my imagination. This is one of the most dramatic parts of the temple. The scale was enormous.
These colonnades are part of the major temple, and I suppose that's the most famous part of the complex. But I'd never seen the beams of the roof.
It's hard to imagine that these temples were once painted in many, many colors. There are few examples of paint left, very few examples.
Cedar. And the doors here, made of cedar wood, plated with gold, not bronze enriched with gold, no.
There were several obelisks still standing, but many were taken away to various countries. Some in New York Central Park, some in Paris, but there were still a few standing.
Yeah, the one in New York was a gift. The one in London was a gift. The one in Paris was a gift. The one in Istanbul. But I want you just to imagine with me, these obelisks were not heavily male gods, or male kings. And Hatshepsut ruled for 18 years. During those 18 years, she kept the Egyptian era.
I can't pretend to know the symbolism. I just love the images. I was primarily interested in the art as abstraction in a way, without worrying about the symbolism. Thought this was one of the most elegant things I'd seen.
These are examples of some of the most beautiful bas-reliefs in Egypt. Here is a perfect example of Art Deco inspiration.
One.
A fallen obelisk, and on its side, I turned my camera sideways.
the sacred lake.
The most celebrated in and after 3 weeks coming to the land road. It will be the morning. So at the end of
This is a temple that most lady tourists aren't allowed to go in, which the leader of our group decided was nonsense. And we went in. It's all about Osiris with his erections. There are multiple views, multiple depictions of Osiris with his erection.
It's, what's his name, Osiris, after his missing member was found.
This little temple, colloquial name Temple of Love, has all kinds of pornography in it. It's usually closed to the public, but we're able to get access to it. This is the column of rams leading up to the entrance to Karnak Temple. Very, very impressive.